Chapter 1. The Silence Before the Storm. The light of the evening sun, golden and merciful, descended upon the boundless green hills of Canaan, washing with a soft glow those places where the shadow of peace and promise had rested for hundreds of years. The air was thick with the scent of thyme and dry grass, and over Jacob's tents, spread out in the valley, an idyllic silence reigned, broken only by the clear laughter of the shepherds guiding their flocks to rest. In the midst of this peace lived Dinah, the daughter of Leah and Jacob, the only girl among fierce, stern brothers. Her eyes, the color of water in a mountain spring, were truly full of an unstoppable, almost unbearable curiosity for the life that pulsed beyond the confines of her father's camp. She had grown up under the watchful eye of her mother and protected by 12 mighty sons who knew only righteousness and the law passed down from Abraham. The world for Dinah was pure and divided into ours and theirs, and this their world seemed magically attractive in its unknown nature. She dreamed of what lay hidden beyond those hills, of what other women spoke, of their clothes, their songs, their customs. Her young heart, like a bird escaped from a cage, yearned for danger, though it did not yet know the word. That evening, as the shadows lengthened and the gold in the sky began to transition into shades of copper and amethyst, Dinah could not restrain herself. Dressing in simple robes, she stepped beyond the camp's boundaries. She walked lightly, like the breath of wind touching the wheat, hesitantly, yet with a resolve born of 1,000 dreams. Her path led to the gates of the city that towered nearby, Shechem, the dwelling of Prince Hamor. She did not go to strangers. She went to see the daughters of the land, to see sisters in humanity, to share women's talk, to feel part of something larger than just a camp of sheep and formidable brothers. But the world she entered was neither kind nor awaiting her with open arms. It was filled with vices as old as time and dark desires that slept beneath the external veneer of civilization. Among those who observed her was Shechem, the young prince, son of Hamor. By the standards of his land, he was a man of high rank and influence, but his pride was unrefined, and his lust animalistic and unrestrained. Shechem's gaze, like a predator spotting its prey, fixed upon Dinah. Her simplicity, her beauty, which was not hidden by the heavy jewelry and elaborate robes of the local women, struck him. In her was an innocence that, to his corrupt nature, became the sweetest temptation. A fire ignited in his eyes, not love, but an unbridled, destructive passion that blinded his reason and cast aside all laws of hospitality and honor. Shechem did not know how to wait, negotiate, or respect. He saw only his goal. With him were his servants, devoted to his will, asking no questions of morality. They seized her. Who heard her quiet cry? No, on. It was swallowed by the noise of the city preparing for night and the distance to Jacob's camp. Shechem, the prince of the land, took her by force. He violated not only her body, but the honor of the entire house, severing the thin, spiderweb thread of peace between the nomads and the settled people. For Shechem, it was merely a momentary flare of desire that faded in the darkness. But for Dinah, for Jacob, for the 12 sons, it became the beginning of the end of their peaceful life. After the violation, as often happens with tyrants, Shechem suddenly felt a different emotion for Dinah. A mixture of guilt, attraction, and possession. He became deeply attached to Dinah, the daughter of Jacob, and loved the girl and spoke kindly to her. But this loving whisper was merely a late, selfish justification for his terrible act, which was the cause of the coming river of blood. Dinah, locked in his house, remained silent, like a stone statue, with eyes in which the light of curiosity had died, replaced only by a silent, icy void. The first, unnoticed shadow that fell upon the entire lineage of Jacob. Thus, the silence of the evening ended. The storm had begun. Chapter 2. The Wrath of the Brothers. The news of the violation reached Jacob's camp like a thunderbolt on a quiet day. The messenger, sweaty and breathless, could barely utter the words, but they sounded like a bronze hammer striking an anvil. Jacob, the patriarch, the man who wrestled with God and prevailed, suddenly became powerless. His heart, which had endured his brother's betrayal, years of exile, and the struggle with Laban, now trembled with fear and pain. He heard but did not react. Anger, pain, and worst of all, fatherly shame bound him. He was silent. This silence was heavy, leaden, suffocating the air in the tent. He waited for his sons. Dinah's brothers, shepherds, and warriors were in the field with the flocks. They were returning home slowly with the sound of the camp's songs, unaware of the catastrophe that had struck their home. But when they approached and saw the frozen faces of the servants, heard the whisper that tore the air, and finally met the silent, haggard gaze of their father, they understood. The reaction was instantaneous and terrifying. There was no shouting, no tears, only a quiet, volcanic fury. Especially Simeon and Levi, the sons of Leah, Dinah's full brothers. Their faces darkened like the sky before a storm, and the veins in their necks tightened. They were the embodiment of power and ruthlessness in Jacob's lineage, and now that power was directed towards a single merciless goal: retribution. Wrath burned in their chests, not as fire, but as molten steel, and no word, no wise counsel could quell it. They stood, fists clenched, their gazes vacant and cold as winter. This was a fury that sought not justice, but annihilation. Meanwhile, unaware of the abyss he had opened, Hamor, the Hivite prince, Shechem's father, came to Jacob's camp. He arrived accompanied by an entourage, with the air of a proud lord who believed he could easily settle this unfortunate incident with silver and a profitable alliance. His proposal was audacious. He wanted not only to take Dinah as Shechem's wife, but also to unite the families so that their peoples would become one. "Intermarry with us," said Hamor. "Give us your daughters, and take our daughters for yourselves, and live among us, and let this land be before you." Hamor saw this not just as a marriage, but as a political and economic advantage, the assimilation of Jacob's talent and wealth. His speech was smooth, his promises golden, but he spoke to Jacob, forgetting the 12 pairs of eyes watching him like predators from the shadows. Jacob's sons replied deceitfully. Their response was an exquisite and terrible trap, wrapped in the cloak of sanctity. They concealed their anger, allowing it to transform into a chilling, calculated strategy. Reuben, though the firstborn, was silent. Judah, the future king, observed. Simeon and Levi spoke, but their words were measured and agreed upon by all the brothers, who were seized by a single desire for revenge. "We cannot give our sister to an uncircumcised man," one of them solemnly declared, "for that is a disgrace and a dishonor to us. We are the people of the covenant. But if you accept circumcision, and every male among you becomes like us, Then we will be one people, and we will give you our daughters, and we will take yours, and we will live among you." This was a condition that seemed entirely acceptable and even honorable to Shechem and Hamor. They saw it only as a ritual intended to strengthen the alliance with the mighty and wealthy house of Jacob. Hamor and Shechem hurried back to their city, joyful, announcing their success at the city gates. Shechem, consumed by passion, persuaded his people, "Are these men not good? Let them settle in our land, and we will intermarry. Will not their livestock and their wealth and all their animals be ours? Only let us agree to them, and they will settle among us." The people of the city, tempted by Jacob's wealth, eagerly consented. They did not know they were accepting not the seal of alliance, but a sentence pronounced in absolute, unwavering silence. Chapter 3. Blood and Fire. The third day after the mass circumcision was the hardest. The pain, which was sharp initially, had now turned into an exhausting, burning fire that drained the strength from the men of Shechem. They lay in their homes, weak, debilitated, sunk into a feverish, heavy sleep. The city, which only yesterday was bustling with life and joyful anticipation of the future alliance, was now silent, like a tomb. The guard at the gates was frail and drowsy, leaning on their spears. The hour appointed for retribution had arrived. Simeon and Levi, the two whose wrath was the most personal and scorching, took their swords. These swords were not just tools, but an extension of their fury. They sharpened them for a long time, in silence, their faces rigid like masks. They acted not in the frenzy of blind revenge, but with the cold, inhuman resolve of surgeons removing a rotten organ. To them, the city of Shechem was defiled, and the violation of Dinah was not merely a personal insult, but a desecration of the covenant, proof of a savagery that needed to be eradicated. Night fell upon Shechem, quiet, thick, and dark, like velvet. Only the hoot of an owl, resounding above the stone walls, broke the deathly silence. Two shadows, two figures, as if absorbed by the darkness, crept through the gates. These were Simeon and Levi. Their steps were noiseless, and their eyes burned in the darkness with a single, untamed fire. They knew where they were going and what they had to do. The first victim was Hamor, the father. He lay in his house, breathing heavily. The prince, who dreamed of enrichment and greatness, became a victim of his own greed and naivete. Simeon's sword cut short his breath without warning. Then came Shechem. He, who had become deeply attached to Dinah, met his sentence there, in the house that had become a prison for his captive. Levi, with a face distorted by revulsion, struck him. This was the culmination of revenge, not only the fulfillment of a promise, but also the restoration, as they believed, of the violated world order. The slaughter began. Swords flashed like bursts of lightning, illuminating the dirty streets of the city. There was no mercy that night, and Simeon and Levi acted like avenging angels. They went from house to house, where the men of Shechem lay weakened. The scream that escaped the victim's throat was quickly cut short. This was not a battle, but an extermination, a bloody act that forever stained the honor of Jacob's house, even though it was carried out in the name of that honor. Every man capable of bearing arms and posing as a future enemy fell. When the dawn, bloody red, touched the river of blood in the streets, the other sons of Jacob, who had waited for the signal, arrived. They did not participate in the slaughter, But their hands were ready for something else: plunder. They burst into the city, devastating it. They took Dinah from the house of dishonor, where she sat silent, wrapped in her pain and shame. They took the spoil: livestock, flocks, donkeys, everything that was in the city and the field. They took property, women, children, everything in Shechem. This was not just a robbery, but a complete, total annihilation. Shechem vanished from the face of the earth, turning into ashes and a memory of a fatal night when the promise of peace turned into a sword. Chapter 4. The father's fear when Jacob heard the roar of his sons' voices returning from the city, their triumphant yet terrifying appearance, and saw the mutilated, horror-filled faces of the surviving women and children. His heart was gripped not just by fear, but by metaphysical horror. He knew that his sons had executed vengeance, but the price of that vengeance turned out to be too high. This was not law. This was lawlessness committed in his house by his own blood. He emerged from his tent, his face pale, his hands trembling not from old age, but from a rage that could not compare with the fury of his sons. For his rage was the rage of morality. He looked at them, at those 12 faces where fatigue, cruelty, and a sense of duty fulfilled were mixed, and his voice sounded like cracked stone. "You have brought trouble upon me," he cried, his words echoing in the morning air. "You have made me repulsive, made me stink among the inhabitants of this land. The Canaanites and the Perizzites, they will unite. They will come to avenge the blood, and we are few. We are but a handful. They will attack me, and I will perish, I and my house." His fear was not just the fear of death, but the fear of losing God's promise. Jacob, who had strived all his life to adhere to honor, now saw his own sons turn his camp into a den of robbers. He was a prophet and a patriarch, yet his heirs behaved like wild nomads who knew no law but the law of revenge. This fatherly fear was permeated with bitterness. He feared not for himself, but that his sin, his indecisiveness, his silence in the first moment, had caused this universal curse. But Simeon and Levi stood before him like two unbreakable rocks. There was not a drop of repentance in their eyes, only cold, uncompromising hardness. They were warriors who acted according to their own code, and that code placed the honor of their sister above life and above the safety of the entire lineage. Levi, wiping the blood from his sword, replied, "Should our sister, the daughter of Jacob, be treated like a prostitute? Are we not her guardians? Are we not her brothers? Shechem defiled our lineage, and we have washed away this stain with blood, as befits the sons of Abraham, who do not tolerate dishonor among them." Their words were like stones that cannot be grasped by hand, hard, merciless. This was not just an answer, but a challenge to their father's authority. In their eyes burned a fire they considered the fire of justice, but in Jacob's eyes, it was the shadow of the future, for he knew the eternal, unchanging law: blood begets blood. He felt isolated, separated from his sons by a chasm of misunderstanding. They saw an instant victory. He saw an inevitable, long-term catastrophe. Their truth was simple, like the blade of a sword. His truth was complex, like the covenant of God. Chapter 5. The consequences of wrath long. Unbearably long silence reigned in Jacob's heart and tent after that night. It was a silence that came not with calm, but with the heavy, oppressive weight of unseen sin. There was no joy in the camp, which was now filled with spoil. The cries of foreign children, and the silent tension between father and sons. Even the sky seemed lower and grayer. Jacob felt cut off from the source, from the God who always spoke with him on his journey. A black cloud seemed to hang over his tent. It was the cloud of defilement. Jacob understood that his sons, though acting out of a sense of honor and retribution for their sister, had defiled this new land with ruthless slaughter. They violated the unwritten law of nomads, not to use faith for treacherous murder. He looked at his sons, mighty yet stained, and saw in them not heirs of righteousness, but the seeds of strife and cruelty. Most of all, he was troubled by the silence of Dinah, who had returned but was distant. Her young soul was broken, and her presence in the camp was a constant mute reproach. His doubts were heavy, like mountain stone. Was he cursed now? Would the God of promise turn away from him? It was then, in the depths of his despair and loneliness, that a miracle occurred. God, who had seemed silent, suddenly spoke to Jacob in a vision, not in wrath, but in a command that contained forgiveness and salvation. "Arise, go up to Bethel," the voice resounded, penetrating his very soul, "and dwell there, and build an altar to the God who appeared to you when you fled from the face of your brother Esau. Return to the source of your covenant." This command was for Jacob not only a direction for the journey, but also a direction for internal purification. Bethel, house of God, was the place of his first covenant with the Lord, a place of purity. To return there, it was necessary to cleanse himself of everything that the blood of Shechem had brought. Jacob, having rediscovered the resolve of the patriarch, gathered his household. He spoke to everyone with him, not only to his family, but also to the foreigners who had joined him and the captured spoil. "Put away the foreign gods that are among you, and purify yourselves, and change your clothes." This was a great act of repentance and rebirth. Jacob's people, including the women and servants, brought him all the foreign gods they possessed, idols brought from Mesopotamia, and amulets captured in Shechem. Jacob buried them all under the oak near Shechem. This was not just physical purification, but spiritual demarcation. He symbolically buried his past, his fears, and the sins that could disrupt his connection with the one God. And they traveled on. Over them, as stated in the ancient writings, lay the fear of God upon the cities around them. No one dared to pursue Jacob's sons, for the Lord protected their path, preventing other nations from uniting for revenge. They walked on, leaving behind the land where blood was spilled, but not leaving the memory of it. Jacob restored his altar at Bethel, returning himself and his house to the pure space of the covenant. But he knew this wound, though covered by God's grace, would remain in the souls of his sons forever. Chapter 6. The price of wrath and the memory of generations' years passed like shadows across the earth. The wounds on Dinah's body may have healed, but the wound in Jacob's heart never closed. He became Israel, the father of 12 mighty tribes, but the memory of Shechem, like cold rust, corroded his soul. He did not forget how his son's eyes shone that night, the eyes of Simeon and Levi, full of wrath and retribution. These eyes were a mirror in which he saw not heroes, but two unrestrained, uncontrolled beasts who destroyed peace for the sake of honor. Jacob realized that their sword was an instrument of cruel justice, but it also became a sign of a curse. It was a demonstration of uncontrollable, hypertrophied fury, capable of bringing misfortune to the entire lineage. He saw how this fury, this gift and curse, was passed on, like a dangerous inheritance that could split his family. His final hour arrived. He lay on his deathbed, a profound elder who had outlived his time, ready to merge with eternity. All his sons gathered around him, now heads of large families who had become the tribes of the future nation. Jacob, gathering his last strength, blessed them, prophesying their destiny. When it came to Simeon and Levi, the air in the tent became heavy, like lead. The voice of the old patriarch, which had been full of grace and hope, suddenly became stern and firm, as if carved from stone. His words were not a curse that destroys, but a prophecy that limits. Simeon and Levi are brothers. Their schemes are cruel. Into their secret council do not enter, my soul, and to their assembly do not unite, my glory. For in their anger they killed a man, and in their self-will they hamstrung oxen. Cursed be their anger, for it is fierce, and their wrath, for it is cruel. I will divide them in Jacob and scatter them in Israel. This was his final verdict. He cursed not the sons, but their anger and their wrath. Jacob denied them a monolithic inheritance and the integrity of the land. He decided that such destructive energy could not be gathered in one place, lest it cause a new Shechem, a new river of blood. He condemned them to dispersion. And so it happened. In time, the tribe of Simeon became small and merged into the tribe of Judah, not receiving its own distinct share of the land. And the tribe of Levi, although scattered throughout Israel, became the priestly tribe, not receiving an inheritance, but receiving the privilege of serving God. Thus, their military, unrestrained energy was either absorbed or redirected to spiritual service, the only way to curb their cruel wrath. Thus ended the story of wrath and honor, of brothers who were not afraid of revenge, but lost peace. And even through generations, as their people grew and became numerous, the memory of Shechem remained a warning that even justice, unrestrained and burning, can sear the soul, and fury, not subdued by law, brings not power, but dispersion. This was the tragic price paid by the house of Israel for one day when Dinah went out to see the daughters of a foreign land.